My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. I'm only here to even the score. Whoa. My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. We down right now, but did it before. Whoa. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up.
Hello, Night Nation, and welcome to the Knighted Ones. It is episode number 78. Yes, that's 78. As a reminder, we are the only podcast that features a former UCF national champion, a former UCF radio host, an ESPN analyst and hoops player, an infamous rapper, our resident influencer, and IG stars shooting the breeze, talking UCF sports. Remember to like and follow us on YouTube, IG, X, and all of the other things. And check out the 70-plus teams and conferences on the College Huddle and Big 12 Huddle. So lots and lots and lots and lots of ranked teams right now. So that's super exciting. We'll be talking about that here pretty soon. Now, obviously, it's not in basketball, which we all kind of want, but maybe baseball will sneak in there soon once the RPI catches up to the rest of the season. But lots of good things to talk about there. We're going to talk a little bit about UCF football. We'll talk a little bit about our poll that we put out there. Thank you to all of you that participated and what those results were. And then set up our next one before we talk about hoops. We'll talk UCF hoops, UCF baseball. We don't have Josh or Alan this week. Alan is Jamaican me crazy in Jamaica right now. So he won't be joining us. So we won't have an oxymoronic stat of the week or sometimes funny fact of the week, but we will have plenty of updates on sports that Alan does not watch. Without further ado, let me go ahead and bring the man, the myth, the legend, the hairdo, Nobra, to the stage. Nobra, what's up, bruh?
What's going on?
Hey, good to see you, man. Hey, now, there it is. Let's get that hair flip going. All right. Next to the stage, we've got Ben Stout, the tallest man in podcasting. What up, Ben?
What's up? What's up? Good to be with you guys for another week. Light crew tonight, but we're going to hold strong.
That's right. Holding down the fort. Trey Neal is also still in surgery. So he was a 50-50 shot. Actually, he gave it a 60% shot, but it looks like the doctors need to do some extra cleanup on aisle 9. So we will not be having Trey tonight, but you do have the two of us and Nobra. So let's get right into it and talk a little UCF football. One of the things that happened this past week is that spring open practices were announced. They are announced for Saturday, April 5th from 10:30 to 12:30 p.m. at the Bounce House. And then Friday, April 11th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Bounce House as well. So obviously, it's already been announced that we're not going to have a spring game. So we do have the open practices that came out. I think they realized they needed to do something there because Scottfrost certainly does not like to have open practices. But what do you think about that, Ben? I talked a little bit to Trey about this earlier on this week, so I'll give his notes. But what do you think about doing open practices?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's something's better than nothing. I'm glad that we are going to open it up to the fans for a couple of practices here during the spring. I imagine we're not going to see much, but honestly, what do we really see much of during the spring game, right? Like, we don't really get that much of a hint of what's going on. We know we're all going to break down 10-second clips prior to that we get, of practices of which which quarterback steps foot on the practice field first.
We're gonna analyze that throwing motion, right?
Yes, the throwing motion season, and just did he complete that one pass in the end of practice that we only saw for 10 seconds, and who knows what else they did the rest of the time. So yeah, that's what spring season is all about. It is going to be, I think it's going to be fun to see a couple of practices, and I hope that they structure these open practices in such a way that you do get, whether or not you get like a great idea of exactly what's going to go on with the team, but at least get a feel for some of the athletes that we have and kind of put on a show for the fans in these 2 open practices. Obviously, it's going to be a totally different format and energy than a spring game. But I think that's okay because you kind of lower the expectations and you get a chance to maybe be surprised by a few things. That UCF fans, all of us, including us here on this podcast, are going to, analyze and overanalyze, some of the things that we see in those open practices. But that's what we do during spring ball. We're all just excited for any type of football and any type of preview that we're going to see in the fall. So, I in lieu of a spring game, which I never really have been a huge fan, except for that kind of probably one of the, the first Frost game and a few others that we were excited for as far as spring games go. Never been like a huge fan of it. I think they're a little bit overblown and overrated, but I guess if we're going to go away with them, and I understand the reasons why, at least we have these 2, 2-hour open practices where we get some sort of preview.
Yeah, I mean, look, realistically speaking, spring games are, and especially lately with the format that Gus had, it was not even a spring game, really. You had, you had your favorite players out there returning punts and doing all kinds of weird stuff. But, it's something to get excited about, to tailgate,
right.
To see your friends, those folks that you're going to see during the season. You kind of get after the Christmas holiday and all of that stuff, it's a long stretch before you get back into the swing of things. So I think we all look forward to it. I talked to Trey about this because the one thing that I was interested in were we going to see stretching or anything of substance, right? So,
yeah.
And the thing we talked about was timing and when those practices were going to be. Trey's supposition is, especially on the April 11th one, that we may actually get to see some scrimmage play. They expect, if they're using the stadium, that there may be some scrimmaging that's going on, and what they're using it for is to evaluate, the talent that they have, number one. So it won't be the ones versus the ones, right? It'll be ones versus twos or threes, and most of the time it won't be the ones out there. Most of the time it'll be the other guys that they're trying to shuffle in the deck to try to figure out who fits where. Because again, this roster is going to change yet again, because you've got that second signing season.
Another transfer window opens up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, the team that you have is not the team that you're going to have. So it'll be interesting to see, who's going to be out there, who's going to be playing. So there's still some value. And I do think you may see some scrimmaging out there. You may not, who knows? We hope that they'll at least be able to sell hot dogs and Coke, like what George O'Leary used to say, right? Every butt in a seat is a hot dog. So we'll see what happens, but I don't know. For me, it's good to see that format again for years since Frost, including Heupel, and then into the Malzahn era. We weren't able to see any in practice. Even media wasn't allowed to stay. They saw the first 10 minutes of stretching and running drills, and that was it. Maybe a couple of throwing drills here and there. And that's where your comment about analyzing the zip on the pass and the release point and, all that stuff was coming from when we became armchair QB evaluators. But that was it. So I'm excited that it's twice. We get a 2-hour event. I don't know if they're going to allow any tailgating to go along with that. I doubt it, because they didn't really make a big deal of that. But it's an opportunity for all of us to get together and tide ourselves over until August, when we get back out on the football field again.
Yeah, and what'll be interesting too is is just, I mean, it's only 6 days apart. You actually, it would be kind of cool if, and you're going to have to tell me, Roger, if you know this. I don't want to put you on the spot, but like, I don't
Of
know,
course.
where do these line up in the like spring practice schedule as far as April 5th and April 11th? Like, what does spring start and run to? And maybe the fans don't know this because I don't, so it'd be helpful for
Well,
them.
spring football already started, right? And so a lot of
Okay.
that is going to be because remember, it has to do with the ability of the coaches to be able to interact
Right.
with the team, right? So they had a report date already. That was, I think, a week or two ago that they had to be report in. And so they're
I
going
imagine
through
this is
strike.
on the tail end of that then. This is on the tail
Yes.
end of spring
Yeah, exactly.
availability.
So April into May, right, is going to be really the tail end of that. And then May, you have that extra window that opens up again for transfers. So it'll be interesting to see how many people don't think that they're going to get the ability to, have time because again, and then you have the chance for our coaching staff to really evaluate the transfers that they did bring in and say, okay, are these guys going to be impact players, or are these folks going to be folks that are not going to be contributing for us? Because then it resets our ability to go back out and try to find some more guys in that second transfer window.
Yeah, and that would be interesting if there was more than 6 days in between these two spring practice availabilities, because then because we overanalyze everything, as I said, and it's like it would be even more like, oh man, in the first spring practice, I saw this person catch the first couple passes for the QB, and this one I see he was with the second group, or all that stuff that you'd overanalyze everything if it was like 3 weeks in between to see where you could try to guess where the growth was coming from. Obviously, only 6 days in between doesn't allow for that a whole lot, but I think I'm with you on the sense that I hope that we at least see a little bit of like 7-on-7, like a little bit of passing the ball around. These coaches don't have to give up too much on what the offense is going to look like, but still, we'd like to see our athletes run around on the field and throw the football and catch the football and all that.
Yeah, I mean, the offense is not even going to start getting to be installed until after,
Right.
They'll have the playbooks to learn the basics and stuff like that, right? But all the wrinkles and all the things that are going to be unique for the offense this upcoming season, you're not going to see that this early because we don't even know what roster we're going to have after the transfer window, right? So
don't get excited about any of these guys, I guess.
Well, no, I mean, you'll get to see the traditional guys, the Burdell Richardsons or the John Walkers of the world, those guys that we know are going to be Sincere Edwards. I'm excited to see him, to see what they're going to be, what they're going to look like. How are they going to, where do they stack up? Can we see in the ones? We've got a lot of defensive ends, so we'll see how much run each one of those get. But I have a feeling that the guys that are going to be the ones or in competition for the ones, you're not going to see them as often. You're going to see those 2s and 3s to see who's going to step up to get that time because they need to see what they have going into that transfer window. And that way they say, okay, this guy didn't pan out the way that I thought he was going to be. He let himself go over the break. He's now out of shape. You get to talk to people, and over this period of time, as you're getting into meeting rooms, you're quizzing them, doing the old Bill Belichick where you stand in front of the room and you're asking people questions in their rooms, all of that fun stuff. And here's another big thing that wasn't a factor before under Gus Malzahn that will be a factor because I've heard it repeated both by Scottfrost and his staff. So he's really drilling this into everybody, is making sure, and Trey obviously talks about this a lot when he talks about his team, is the culture and who's going to fit that culture and be the type of person that wants to be there. Mark Daniels' voice, the starting lineup for UCF on offense, valued at $12.5 million. Yeah, that's good, Tim. Exactly, 100%. I don't think I could do Mark Daniels' voice, though. He's a little too nasally for me to be able to handle that. But and it wouldn't be Mark Daniels anyway. It would probably be Jeff Sharon. I think he's still announcing games, so it'll probably be Jeff Sharon. But that being said, that's going to be the big thing that we're going to be able to see, and it's really more of an evaluation period. And having talked to Trey, we do think that that's going to be, from a timing perspective, you are going to see some scrimmaging in those games. And that makes sense because it's 2 hours long and it's in the bounce house, right? So,
I just hope that there's some structure to it that makes it entertaining for the fans. Like I hope that they're not just checking the box. And I can't imagine Frost is going to be so close to the vest where it's just going to put together a boring, 4 hours total of football, for the fans. If we're going to do these spring open practices, I think there's going to be some entertainment value, or at least a structure that visually, like, for us to see something, right? Like for us to get excited about this football team coming up in the fall, right? And again, we know that the personnel is going to change for some of it, but at least the structure of it just kind of gets us excited about football to sustain us a little bit longer until through the summer and all that.
I'm just hoping they use part of the time for fan engagement. It would be great.
No, that'd be great too. That's going to be super important for sure.
Yeah, like getting all these guys. I remember my first year that you remember when Drop signed.
Yeah,
he was there, and we still had the team events where you could get all of the posters signed. So I had him sign, right? And he was at the end of the table, and all the senior guys are there, and the upperclassmen. And he's at the end, and he signs my poster Drop. And everybody looks at him. He's like, "Man, you can't sign your poster. You got to sign it with your name." But I kept that. So I think I got the only one that's named that's signed Drop. But like those little bits and pieces of engagement, right? Those are the kinds of things you need. Lately, it's just been, all right, let's go to the arena and go table to table and try to get signed all within an hour. Like you can't do that, right? No. So it's not the same vibe. So I hope they use part of that time for that. But the rest of the time, I think they are going to scrimmage, having talked to Trey. And then the other thing Trey said is he's going to be coming up more frequently again. Obviously, he's got his connection with Scottfrost. He's got an open invitation. So he's going to be up there as well. So we'll share what we can when we can. We have to respect his relationship with Coach Frost, but he'll have some insights like he always does from the sidelines. So it'll be really, really interesting to see how that works out. Another big piece of news, I don't know if you saw this announced yet today, but No Bull, we've been talking about our billionaire, one of our billionaire boosters. No Bull actually signed with about 14 or 15 of our players today, including Sincere Edwards and Burdell Richardson and a few other people. 3 of the 4 quarterbacks, one of them that did transfer in, that was Scott's guy, didn't sign him or it wasn't announced. But basically, they're sponsoring and doing a true NIL deal with these guys. So in addition to what we're going to be paying, and remember, if and when, which right now it's in limbo, that legislation changes for rev share, we are still going to have the ability for guys like Noble to do actual NIL deals. So how they were intended with appearances and things like that. So that was interesting that was announced today. There was a little bit of a scandal, quote unquote scandal, with some pictures that came from the basketball locker room after, where people were kind of hemming and hawing and making a hard time. So it looks like that relationship is still strong. Remember, RJ Harvey last year had a sponsorship from
I was about to say that. RJ Harvey was a big Noble guy last year.
Yeah. So, and he shared with his teammates, right? But it looks like now more of his teammates are able to share in that relationship. So that's exciting, because to me, it shows that it's a deepening relationship and a continuation of that relationship with one of our potential, most important current and future boosters as he enmeshes himself more with the program. So that was exciting. Jimmy Beal also had an interview. He's our running backs coach. So it was interesting kind of listening to him talk. I didn't know this, but Jimmy Beal actually knew Coach Scottfrost for 10 years before this. And basically their relationship, he met him at camps at Oregon. And when he met them at the camps at Oregon, he kept a relationship going, and they touch base periodically. And you hear some of these stories with some of the other folks where he didn't know them really well, but he kind of kept tabs on them, and they had mentor type relationships, which kind of works well there. He talked a lot about Miles Montgomery, right? So he was asked some questions about Miles and what his role was going to be in the running back room. And he said he was really impressed with Miles Montgomery. His strength was a north-south runner, but he's one of those guys that kind of makes a decision and goes, where, RJ Harvey, we're kind of used to him waiting for the play to play itself out, to get behind his blockers and go where he needs to go. He's a speed guy. He's really fast. He had some injuries that he's been dealing with. But it's very interesting to say that. He also talked about Taevion Swift, which is our new 4-star running back. He was our earliest signee for last year's class. And, a lot of people thought when Gus Malzahn moved on that Taevion might as well. But he stuck with us. He had a recent event in Waterford Lakes. But he talked about him. He said he's really, really a smart and cerebral guy. He knows what he's doing. You can tell the way he speaks publicly because he's done some of these events, these NIL events. He's already learning the playbook and picking it up very, very quickly, which was really, really interesting to hear, that you've got guys like Miles Montgomery that he's seen the tape on, he sees what he can do, and then he's already seeing that in Taevion Swint. Now, the interesting thing that he said relative to managing the running back room was that their approach is not going to try to force the running backs with the talent that they have into the system that they have, but to focus on the strengths that each of the running backs have and then expand upon that into the system, right? So it's interesting because that means that, as we're recruiting and you're watching these guys that we're recruiting, you can kind of tell what direction we're headed, but they're going to focus them and it tells you that they're going to use multiple running backs. We had 1-2 punch with AK and Otis back in Frost the first time he was here. Right. But I expect him to continue to do that. And it looks like we're really going to build players and not systems, and then modify the system around the players, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And that's what we were used to those 2 years that Frost was here, is that we had explosive running backs, but you never knew which one of them was, going to break out at any given time. I mean, so Frost utilized multiple running backs, and I don't expect that to necessarily change here, especially with, when you lose a guy like RJ Harvey, who's a clear lead back, and when you lose a guy like that, but then you also saw flashes of really high level talent out of a guy like Miles Montgomery. Like every time he touched the ball last season, it just, when he was at full strength, it just seemed like he had a chance to break one. And so,
and we saw that at Cincy too, because remember that he played at Cincy and he was the number 2
good
back.
Tape for sure.
Yeah, he was the number 2 back at Cincy, and I remember their number 1 back was highly touted, but then they brought him in, and he was leaning forward. He's quick. His burst is really, really fast.
Yeah, so I'm fascinated with Taevion Swint. I just, everything that I hear about this kid, it just seems to be like the type of kid that not only gets it, like understands what it takes, what it's going to take for him to be successful as a Division I, college athlete. But he seems to bring this energy about him that, like, he seems to have this kind of, determination, and just the brief things that I keep hearing about him. Like, he just seems to be the type of player that's just never going to be, it's the wrong phrase to say never going to be satisfied, because nowadays that implies something else. I mean, he seems like the type of player that's never going to be satisfied at his own, ability to get better. Let's put it that way. Like, he just seems like he's always going to try to be the best version of himself. And he seems like the type of person that could be, future leader in this program, because he already has been showing flashes of those traits, even coming out of high school, and some of the things that he's doing. Just interviews of people that have worked with them on that event that he had, it seems
Well, if
like
you listen to him,
yeah,
just
that's what I
listen
mean.
to him
Yeah,
speak. I mean, he seems to be really mature for his age. And the other
that's
thing that I
the
really
right way
like
to
is
say it. Yeah.
is the hometown hero part of it, right? So,
Mhm.
like, we talk about this in recruiting. We talk a lot about keeping in Central Florida, but Taevion Swint has been one of those guys that like bleeds it, right? So he's
Yeah.
one of the guys that I could see staying here for 3 or 4 years. Now, obviously, you throw a bag, I mean, look at Lee Hunter. He made 1.3, I think, or 1.3 million to go play at Texas Tech next year, right? If you get thrown a bag, Taevion, I love you, man. I want you to stay here forever, but I'd never want you to turn down as a college running back $1.3 million to go play somewhere else. So if you get to that point, hey, and we can't match it, do what you got to do, bro. But like
That means he did some really special things here as well. So
exactly.
I guess I wouldn't be too upset. But on that hometown hero front, I mean, we mentioned with the Noble, contract and everything for multiple players there. But it's just, and you mentioned it when you came to the spring practices, I should say. But a guy that I feel like is going to be that, and he's really proven to be that, is John Walker. Like, we're just excited to see, have him back. And he seems to be the type of player, along with somebody like Swint, which, Gus leaves and he could easily have, said, everyone would have understood if he parted ways with the program. Same with John Walker. But those two guys, amongst others on our roster, but those two guys in particular, just for different reasons and different points of their career, they decided that they were going to stay here at UCF, their local, college, and around where they grew up, and they're going to get after it and make the name for themselves here. And I really appreciate that about John Walker in particular, and even Taevion Swint, that he was one of the first guys that came out and said, "I'm not going anywhere with my recruitment, and
Have you heard
I'm
anything?
sticking with UCF."
Have you heard anything? I don't know if Jake got to play him, but have you heard anything from Jake from any of the camps or any of that kind of stuff?
Going up against
Yeah.
Taevion Swint, I haven't talked to him specifically about him, so I wouldn't be able to speak to that because I just hadn't specifically asked him about that. But yeah, he probably has gone up against him at some point in his high school career. And anytime you're trying to game plan for a special running back like that, it's definitely a full on effort. That's for sure.
Yeah. Maybe at some point at over family dinner or something, you can
Yeah,
ask
I'll have
him.
to ask him about
Say, hey,
Taevion
what do you
Swint,
think about this Taevion kid?
yeah.
But yeah, and going back to Jimmy Beal, he said, they are really, really focusing on recruiting Florida. In his words, there's recruiting Florida, and then there's recruiting Florida. He said they are making a concerted effort to visit with every single high school in Florida. So not just the top high schools, but
That's
every
awesome.
single high school in Florida. And that helps with connections because a lot of these coaches know each other. A lot of them are friends, and you might be at American Heritage, but you're going to another high school. If you show those guys some love too, they're going to move higher up into the high school ranks.
Mhm.
And number two, or B, since I said A, since B, and for B, it gets them to a situation where ultimately those guys are going to be able to, um, leverage those relationships where they're not stuck up and they don't feel like they're seeing those guys just because of XYZ. So, he also mentioned that, and we knew this from Trey's experience, but Coach Frost, he said it's unusual how approachable he is. So they really are focusing in on, and you hear each coach talk about this. We heard it the first time around, on making sure that football is this staff is there to support them, not just in football, but also in life. He said most places you go to a head coach and you're like, oh, can I bother head coach to say hi kind of thing, right? Versus Coach Frost, who's been very, very approachable. That's one of the things that really stuck out to him. And he feels like what they're doing is seeing results. He said for him, watching these guys in the weight room, the foundation of everything is strength and conditioning. And watching these guys in the weight room, they're bought in and they're being pushed and they're not shying away from them. They're not skipping sessions. They're not late. They're not anything like that. He said they're all in and pushing through. So at the end of the day, it bodes well, and it seems to be working because we're hearing it from someone now. Granted, that's his head coach, but he wasn't prompted to give that answer, right? So he's seeing it and he's mentioning it as well. So it was a good interview. I encourage you to kind of check it out. He said that he's although they recruited Florida, they are recruiting beyond that, and he's got a lot of experience in managing running back rooms that from different places. His last running back room, he said one was from New York, one was from the West Coast, one was from the Midwest. So those are different cultures, and he's had good experience with that. Tim says the days of 4-year player from freshman to senior and graduating will be considered an anomaly. Tim, I agree with you. The question is going to be how does someone like Mike Rapole and No Bull tip the balance there, right? From a financial standpoint, can we pay them enough for it, for the hometown hero theme and all of that to kind of outweigh moving on to somewhere else, right? Lee Hunter's from Alabama. He's got a kid, it makes sense for him. Can we get close enough to not have $200,000 to $300,000 or $100,000 make a difference for someone to move on? I don't know, but we still have to, in my opinion, still have to foster that culture and build it like we're going to assume that they're going to stay here, and then whoever goes. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, and I think it's gotta stem. It has to, in order to keep these guys here, it's going to have to stem from the culture first and foremost. You have to have that foundation of as Josh likes to talk about, the vibes, right? Like you have to have, the right culture around the team to where these guys are so motivated to be together and to stick together and really work together for a common goal. And the excitement around that. And then once the off season hits, once the transfer portal opens up, and once this, wild west of legal tampering essentially, starts in college football, and the money starts starts flowing, then you've got to have kind of the wherewithal, the financial resources in order to tip the scales just enough where it can't just be all about the money. That's what I'm trying to say. It can't be all about the money because we can't compete on that front if it's only about the money. So it's got to be first and foremost about all the reasons why we're excited that Scottfrost is back, right? Like that's,
and it's winning.
Yeah. Oh, certainly. Yeah. I mean, everybody wants to be a part of winning. Everything that I'm just talking about, it kind of leads up to winning, right? It's the process that leads up to winning. And so winning has to be part of that foundation, of course, as well. I'm more or less speaking about the processes, not necessarily results yet, but absolutely winning is a huge part of it. And then you would hope that you have enough resources to kind of just put that last needle, straw that, goes onto that pile that keeps them here or keeps the important players, keeps the players that will not only continue on physically to propel the program forward, but culturally as well. And so I think that's the way it's got to be here at UCF for the foreseeable future. And then maybe one day, a decade from now, we're right there with the amount of resources that we have. We're right there with any other, college football program. It stands to reason that that's not a crazy thought considering our young alumni base, and we're creating we have plenty of entrepreneurs that, that are going to be created every day at UCF that 10 years from now will be on a level of some of the old money in the colleges that they have, including Roger Fitz.
I'm hoping that's what I'm going
that's the
for,
goal, right? And exactly, but that actually, I think you're a great example of that, Roger, because who knows what on like those who are at a great level right now, but 10 years from now, that whole base that continues to grow as far as, the amount of people that we graduate every year and the types of people that we're graduating every year. And that fan base continues to grow and grow and grow. And as long as you can keep them engaged as they progress in life, so does our program. And so it stands to reason just by sheer numbers alone that we're going to be at that financial level one day. But certainly for the foreseeable future, we have to lean on creating something special here that doesn't that's not necessarily about the money, and the money is just a good part of that as we start to allocate it.
Well, I think, you have the opportunity with the hometown thing. If we start winning again, all these kids remember the Frost years, the first go round, right?
Yeah, they were in like middle school and stuff like that.
Yeah,
like they were
exactly. And there's the pride.
Yeah.
So if we're now in the power conferences, which we weren't before, right? If we have the ability to win, right? And you're creating a culture that makes it hard to leave, because again, there's ultimately going to be a business decision. Do you believe you can get to the NFL? If you can you do it at UCF? And then the second part of that is, if you're not going to get to the NFL, are you going to go, try to perform the best that you can and then try to get paychecks? And then that second scenario that we were talking about comes into play, right? Because if you've got a team that is working well together and you've got friendships and bonds and strength, you see this out of high school where players try to go to the same college, right? That's going to keep them there too, or tip the balance if we need it to, if we can, because if you start over, you're just going to the team as a hired gun. Mm-hmm. Locker room dynamics are such that, especially in football, that the guys that have been there together and fought the wars together, they're going to insulate themselves, and you have to earn your way into that group, right? So your experience in college is a big part of that too. So if you believe in the head coach and they're sticking around, you have a team that you've overcome stuff with and you've got really, really close bonds with, it's going to make it a lot harder on guys to leave. And we're not going to win when we can offer somebody $350,000 and they can get $1.3 million at Texas Tech. But then the flip side of that is you've already made the decision probably that you're not going to go to the NFL, because the people that are offering $1.3 million or $2 million for UCF athletes are also the people that are doing poorly and have a bag that they can try to move up quickly, right? Sure. So, we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, I think it's a combo of both, and if not, it's a value add. But right now for Taevion Swint, everything that he's said makes you believe that he's going to stick around and he's here for the right reasons. Now, one other thing that'll kind of dovetail, and we'll get back to this a little bit later on in our poll, but the Houston Space game was moved to a Friday night. Traditionally, it's been a Saturday night. What do you think about this? Do you think it's going to impact things? They said it was so that we could be featured on a better broadcast channel, right? And we might try to make this into a thing. I hope Houston eventually gets into it, and with the uniforms and stuff, the alternate uniforms and stuff like we did before. I mean, we obviously have shown that we can do that. We did it with the Cows on the Black Friday games, right? Yeah. And that was a success for the AAC. Houston's a big city. Orlando's a big city. Can we make it into this into a thing? I like Saturday night games. We didn't get hardly any last year. So I'm kind of bummed about that. But how do you feel about getting pushed from a Saturday night game to a Friday night game?
I mean, I think it's not terribly surprising considering that you're talking about one team that was 4-8 and the other team that was what they only won one game last year, I think. I mean, they were just Houston was just unless I'm mistaken, they just are forgetting. They just had a horrible season last year, and quite frankly, from UCF, as far as what we thought it was going to be going into the season, we certainly had a disappointing season at 4-8. And so when you're looking at two teams that the most exciting thing about them that you can think of just on paper is like the uniforms, like then you're probably going to kick that to a Friday night game to try to get those two teams a little bit more exposure on let's call it a non-prime football night and not having Saturday night, right? Because if we were on Saturday night, more than likely would have been like an ESPN Plus game if both schools, I mean, hopefully not UCF, but if both schools were having that kind of season that they had last year. But Houston really hasn't invested much in their football program. They've certainly gone all in on basketball. And I'm sure that'll change coming up. But as far as more money towards their football program, certainly not a higher percentage because they're not taking it away from their basketball program. But yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly going to be more investment coming up, and they've been able to pull highly rated recruits in the past. But Houston hasn't done much in football over the last few seasons, and quite frankly, neither have we. So I don't blame them for shifting it to a Friday night game, and hopefully, and this is just I just lost this out of my head. Is Houston always going to be the space game from now on because of the background of both?
They're trying to build it into that, yes, as a conference rival. And let me say this: Houston actually was higher in the ending standings last year than we were. We were both 4-8.
They were 4-8 as well. Okay, I thought they only won one game.
Yeah, they were 4-8, but did better in conference. They were 3-6 in conference, which means they only won one out of conference game. Whereas we were 2-7. Now we had a lot of close games, but they did have wins last year against Rice. And then they got beat by Cincinnati 34-0, right? Then they beat TCU 30-19, and TCU was schizophrenic last year. Yeah. Then they beat Utah 17-14. Then they turned around and beat Kansas State 24-19. And that was it.
Wild. You forget how weird the Big 12 was last year for football.
Yeah, TCU was schizophrenic. Here's the thing. Houston had a really good defense last year. They had an anemic offense last year. Yeah. So the games that they won off of their defense. They should bring the core back for that defense. So it'll be interesting to see what happens and how far into form our offense has evolved by the time that we play them, because that'll be a November game. But it will be interesting. I think from an experience side, I'd rather have it on a Saturday night, but if it gets us more exposure, I guess that's what we have to do, because it sounds like it would have been relegated to like an ESPN Plus game or something otherwise, and the conference is trying to build it up as a rivalry game, and I think that's what you're seeing.
And that's the part I like about it too. It's going to be on a better network more than likely. It won't be relegated to another network because the Saturday night game. There's another Saturday night game that is going to be pushed more. So I think that part of it, even if it's in November, it's kind of I don't want to call it a guarantee, but the fact that it is on Friday night is almost a guarantee that we won't get booted to ESPN Plus if one of those teams, hopefully not us, but if one of those teams, isn't improved over last season, and because
we better be improved over last season. I think last season we had a good enough team. We didn't have a good enough coaching, and going back to something that we were talking about on the running back interview that Jimmy Beal said, and I was talking to Trey about this past week about this, is that we ran out of gas in the fourth quarter, And one of the things that came out after all of this was said and done was that the strength and conditioning, Gus at the time, one of the benefits to the players was he said he wasn't going to push them on strength and conditioning. The strength and conditioning coach parted ways because Gus wouldn't let him push the players. One of the best in the business that came from K-State that we were all excited about at the time. And you saw the results on the field. And without that strength and conditioning, one of the things that Frost did, O'Leary really built strength. And what Frost did was he took the conditioning part and added it to it. And, you need to be able to run and have the aerobic buildup and balance that so that you optimize it so you can play all 4 quarters at the highest level and not get worn out. And that was not what was happening last year.
No, yeah, you're right about that. It's just I think that attitude by Gus was one of the toughest things to deal with as a fan, because you're right. I mean, we faded so many times in the fourth quarter. It seemed like they were just waiting, part of that was the fading, but as fans, when you're watching it, you're just kind of like so tight, waiting for the downfall to happen. And certainly it stands to reason, looking back on it with the benefit of hindsight, that strength and conditioning wasn't there, where they did fade in multiple ways in the fourth quarter. And it was frustrating as a fan base to see that and then get that confirmation later on, after the season's over, that there wasn't a whole lot of pushing there. And then, quite frankly, like the pushing wasn't happening. It almost seemed like, I don't want to look back too much, but it's almost like, from the KJ Jefferson standpoint of like all the rumors of him not knowing the playbook and all that, it seems like there was no pushing there at all, right? Like there's no accountability.
He was selling the stars. He wasn't he wasn't pushing, and the accountability wasn't there, and the culture wasn't there, and all the things we just spent a lot of time talking about on the recruiting stuff, right? Yeah. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to our next segment. And, the new segment that we started, the poll of the week. This is our second week doing this. And last week, we asked Knight Nation, now that things had kind of died down, whether the administration at UCF, if they felt that the administration at UCF was out of touch with the fan base and misunderstood or did not understand the fan base. And so we had a result of 90, a lot more participation this week, which was great. Let's keep that going, keep sharing it. 90.2% of the respondents said that they felt UCF was out of touch with the fan base. Now, obviously, DeSalvo and his team and his creative team, that's one of the stalwarts that kind of have stayed here year over year, and I think he's still good. Jimmy obviously is still good, but the fan base truly feels like the admin is out of touch. And that was our point last week as well. Not last year, last week, but the continuous things over and over again. And one additional thing, which we'll talk about when we get to the hoops segment, might also reinforce that as well. So 90.2%. So I think it kind of reinforces what we were saying last week. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, he has, Terry Mahajer has, he has stubbed his toe numerous times, since he's been here. I think he lost a little shine as the Gus, era came to a close there. And then all of a sudden he had a couple of great months in a row. I mean, the fact, whether he deserves the credit for it or Gus, completely initiated it, like the fact that we didn't have to buy out Gus was a huge plus in Terry Mahajer's, a big feather in his cap, right? Like, that we didn't have to lose that amount of money to buy Gus out. And then on top of that, obviously going about, I thought the fan base in particular, certainly this is the way I felt. I thought the process of hiring Scottfrost, I thought he went about that relatively well. where it did seem, from the outsiders looking in, it was, a little bit chaotic at first, but, kind of as more and more came out about that process, it seemed like he gained a lot of, great standing with the fan base. But then, like a lot of people in the public eye tend to do, they tend to step on their message or stub their toe. And obviously the email, the ticket gate, or whatever you want to call it, right? Like it's just something that a big time program, but especially at a program that is like UCF. Like we are a very unique fan base with the youth of our fan base, with the kind of chip on our shoulder kind of attitude that we have coming from the AAC, and always trying to be striving to grow at our national standings, and the fans that were included in that email, being lumped in with, I guess, an unintentionally lumped in with a group of people like ticket brokers and things like that
I'm
they're
not
trying
so
to vet out.
convinced.
Like
I'm not convinced that they weren't intentionally included. The problem with it is the messaging that went with it. If the messaging would have been softer, think about it. Okay, so in your business, right, Ben, if you sent out an email to all of your clients, your
Right.
active clients, right, and use that accusatory language, I don't think you would ever do that.
No,
I don't think,
of course not.
at no other business would you be able to do that. I certainly couldn't do it at any of mine, right?
Right.
So I think that's where he really stubbed his toe, and then not coming out and adamantly apologize. But I don't want to rehash that because we've had a whole episode about it,
we
right?
talked about it all last week.
But Tim said fans are just bored right now. Terry could have dropped the Epstein list and someone would feel not listened to, which is hilarious, Tim. But I will say this, for me, I think what it is, honestly, with Terry is that it's a continuous stubbing of the toe.
Yeah.
It's not,
why isn't he learning?
One incident, right? It's the, hey, the G5 reference of what was it? FAMU or FIU or FAU or FIU reference in his opening. He just doesn't seem to understand that we're, yes, in the pecking order of the P5, we're not the top of the P5, right? We all get that.
Right.
But what are you doing and what are you communicating that's pushing us there, right? Not bowing down for the 2-1 or 1-1 or whatever he said it was for the scheduling thing, right? That's that disconnect. UCF fans don't want that.
Right.
They don't want that. We want to be the challenger brand. In order for us to be the challenger brand, you have to challenge the norms. And that's why we liked Danny White. Now, again, he's following Danny White. You see what he's doing at Tennessee. It's one of the best ADs in the country, right? And yes, it's easier at Tennessee, but he still has to move the needle. There were plenty of people at Tennessee that didn't move the needle. And it's about that leadership style and pushing that I don't think Terry understands, even if it's about expecting more or pushing for more or putting those lofty goals out there, because we have it as a fan base for this program. And although we're not there yet, we need to be talking about how we're going to get there. Okay, we have the $12 million that we need to catch up on with everybody else, that everybody else has got more money, right? The messaging just sucks. Whoever his PR person is.
And I think that's what I was thinking. It's like, we can, no one's feeling sorry for Terry Mohajir because he followed Danny White, but because the reality is you did follow a guy in Danny White who, I think one of Danny White's biggest strengths is that he was extremely sophisticated in how he could enter any room and make everybody in that room feel like he knew how to speak on their level, knew how to talk to them, knew how where he could talk to the top, billionaire CEOs in a certain way, and be completely genuine in that conversation, and then talk to, guys like me at just, alumni of the school that, talk to about any topic involving UCF athletics, and make sure that both of those groups genuinely felt like that conversation was important to him. And I think that while Terry Mahajer means well, and I don't think that he necessarily is I don't want to call him like an ingenuous person, because I don't think that he is, but I think that he lacks sophistication to be in the role that he is. He lacks a certain level of sophistication to be in the role that he is. And that has, not only been an observation from the fan base, but I think it's been an observation of people who I know have been in the room with them on certain negotiation type things that are very serious and involve a lot of money. And they're a different conversation than, hey, I'd like to just win more football games,
Well, or let's just talk about some more recent examples. The Ted Roof thing, right? Pay the man his money. You're going to pay more in legal fees, and he's going to end up winning anyway. What's the point?
I know that exactly. And that's such a great example too, because I didn't really get a chance to talk about Ticketgate last week, so I don't want to hatch it too much, because I know we talked about the whole episode. But I feel like at the end of the day, what were you even sending that email out for? You were just trying to get a little bit more in ticket fees if they resold their tickets on Ticketmaster. Is that a hill that you want to die on? I
don't think it's that. I think it's more, hey, we feel like we have a ticket list here that we can then, bridge a gap. Because, okay, I mean, here's the reality of it. The people that show up to the games and will pay the money for the tickets instead of just watching on TV, those are your most likely people to donate, right? So do you want to get them into the stadium and more ingrained in it and whatever?
I know, but how, from a former football player, how does he not know that, actually, let me put it this way. It showed that he does not understand what the UCF fan is. And as a guy that has been around the program for going on 25 years now, and both of us have, it's just we understand what UCF fans are. We understand what Orlando sports fans are, and what Orlando sports fans are. And I don't care who I offend to this, because it's the dang truth. I'm an Orlando sports fan. I'm a UCF alumni. I'm a UCF sports fan. And the fact of the matter is, there is too much going on in this city that if you're not winning, we just don't care as much as other schools. Trey's talked about it a million times. Trey has talked about it a bunch at Nebraska. What's the motivation when you're losing every game and the stadium is still sold out? There's a waiting list a mile long. That doesn't happen in Orlando. What happens is you have to win consistently in order to gain the attention of the Orlando fan base. And it almost seems like from a lot of the, missteps that Terry Mahajer has made, it has shown that more than anything else, I think, is the lack of understanding of what the Orlando fan base is, what the UCF fan base is. And the UCF fan base is somebody who's a season ticket holder. When we're winning and you can't make it to a game, you can sell the tickets for 3 times face value. When we're not winning, you can't give them away.
Well, and that's especially true, right? When you've given people the vehicle to sell said tickets, and you're getting a fee off of that too, and generating revenue off of that too, and Ticketmaster, right? So, but the bottom line,
that's what he's going after. He's going after the $5 fees, $15 fees. It's come on, guys. That's not what we're going to look at right now. That shouldn't be the hill you're trying to die on.
Especially not after a 4-8 season. People are getting moved around because of the stadium construction. You're losing parking. All those things are happening right now. So it was just not smart. And then even if you were going to do it, change the messaging. It's not just us that's doing this kind of stuff, right?
Who looked at
but at the end of the day, my problem with Terry Mohajir, the way Danny motivated the UCF fan base was not crying what we didn't have. He talked about what we wanted to aspire to. And that's the part I think that he's missing on the messaging. The way to motivate us is not saying, hey, we don't have this, so we can't compete. It's we need this. How do we get there? This is my path forward. If everybody does this and then engage that positivity, that's where you're going to motivate people to join in. Tim says you have to make UCF into as the only thing in a town where there are a ton of things to do. I think from football perspective, it can be, and there's a core group of football. We have people that are season ticket holders that are not from here, didn't go to college here. A lot of our big donors didn't go here. They're not from here, but they live here, right? So you absolutely can do that. The challenge is you're in this precipice where you're trying to grow the fan base, but at the same time, you don't have the stability yet, right? And you're not winning games, and you've got to understand the messaging. And that to me is where Terry Mohajir loses that. And even the decisions that he's making and the way he's trying to message around them, even the decisions like taking a 1-1-1 with Florida or whatever you want to call it, which was really a 2-1. You don't do that. There's the pride, there's the aspiration. You focus on aspiration. And that's why I agree with 90.2% of the fans out there that the administration currently, not everybody in UCFAA, but the administration currently is out of touch, right? So, and then the last thing to your point, Ben, Danny's ability was not just because he naturally had an uncanny ability to do that. At the time, his team would go out and poll people from all over the fan base, not just about topics before he spoke on them. So they would go out and engage with the average fan, the one that isn't donating. They would engage with the shareholders. Whereas everything that Terry's focusing on right now is the shareholders, which is important, but they are not the majority of your fan base. So that's that. Tim says, think about it. UCF football games or Ripley's, believe it or not, UCF football game every day of the week. All right. So for this week's poll, let's go ahead and talk about what that's going to be. Johnny Dawkins, the season's winding down. We'll talk about this a little bit more as we get towards the end of our hoop section here, right, about his future. But do you keep Johnny Dawkins for one more year? Remember, he does have a buyout. And at the end of the day, technically he has one more year left on his contract, and we don't start actually earning. We start earning that after the next calendar academic year, right? So in June will be the next academic year, but we won't get paid the additional revenue until June the following year when the Big 12 makes its disbursement. So, we'll talk a little bit more about Dawkins and his future towards the end of the basketball segment, but that's going to be the poll for this week. All right, UCF Hoops loses a nail biter to West Virginia. It wasn't a nail biter to start with, and
in the first half for sure.
Yeah, it was funny because I went back and looked at the stats after the game because it was a 2-point game with 2 minutes left. So UCF clawed its way back. But when you go back and look at the box score, the crazy thing for me was that we outscored West Virginia 40-25 in the second half. Darius Johnson had a monster, absolute monster game this game. The rest of the team kind of let him down, right? Yeah. Darius Johnson, he played for 39 minutes. He was 10 of 21 from field goal, 4 from 11 from the 3-point line, 3 from 5. He did miss one that would have gotten it closer, that would have kept us in the game. Because what ended up happening at the end was Darius, we got it within 2. Darius went to the line, missed one of the 2 free throws, and they made a 3 right after that. So then it was a 5-point game. And then we shot 2 consecutive threes that we missed. And that pretty much, then it was a foul frenzy, obviously, to try to slow down the game, to keep us in it. So, again, they outscored us 47-25 in the first half, and we outscored them 40-25 in the second. And we were, really, really close. From a stats perspective, we shot 39% from field goal. They shot 40.9. 3-point percent, we shot 32. They shot 32.4.
Very even game, yeah.
Yeah. Free throw percentage, we had an off game. We normally shoot around 80%. We shot 64.7 versus 60 for them. Rebounds were close, 39-44. I mean, all the way down, this was a close game. We had 11 steals, but both of us had we had way too many turnovers, and our points off of turnovers were 17-16. Again, you go all the way down the list, except for the largest lead. West Virginia at one point led this game by 27 points.
Right. Which is kind of crazy how we were able to claw our way back in this game. And I think one of the stats as far as the box score that kind of sticks out to me is just Keyshawn Hall just had a rough night shooting. I mean, 1 for 10 from the field. Like, he just couldn't quite find the rhythm shooting. And so that's one of those things that, when you got your leading scorer in the Big 12, just having that off of a night, just couldn't quite find a way to put the ball in the hole. I just think that's hard to recover from. But then, valiant effort from DJ. Mustafa as well had a pretty good game, kind of a solid overall game, kind of a game that's like him. Dalen Coleman had a couple of big rebounds down the stretch, a couple of big hustle plays like he usually is accustomed to doing. But at the end of the day, we just couldn't quite claw our way back from, as you said, a 27-point deficit at one point.
Well, and the challenge is we saw the same thing. We pointed this out last week or the week before. Keyshawn Hall's problem is that he gets in this mindset that he doesn't open up the rest of the offense so that he then opens up, right? Because he's the leading scorer in the Big 12, right? And as the leading scorer, you're going to get doubled. And so he's getting doubled, but he's got pretty decent handles. He can, outperform most folks in a one-on-one situation. The challenge is that he's not passing the ball. And you saw it again in this West Virginia game, is he's dribbling into defenses and he gets himself in trouble when he can't take his momentum and that first step and get to the hoop. And it's resulting in turnovers. And that was his biggest problem this game, and why he had such a low field goal percentage is because he should have been passing out to open up himself later on in the game, because that's where he's scoring his points.
As similar as the rest of the stats are, that's the one stat that actually is far different, is they had 17 assists as a team and we had 9. I think that just displays what you're talking about, is when the guy that we lean on the most to put the ball in the hole, isn't getting the rest of his teammates involved in order to get himself going, as you're saying, isn't putting in the extra effort on defense either to lead a break or to flip the court around and try to turn it into instant offense. Because of that, I think we had a little bit of we tend to struggle when Keyshawn struggles because the whole offense isn't quite moving. We get stuck kind of watching him, or he tries to do too much with the basketball in his hands. Because he's actually a pretty quick decision. It's one of the reasons why he's such a good scorer, is because if he can get the ball in the right spot on the court, and has a one-on-one matchup, or if it's spread out and somebody like DJ got him the ball in the right position, he's a quick decision maker, and that first step that he has is he can get by people quick. But this game kind of got into a little bit too much of a one-on-one fest with him. And as you said, he's the top of everybody's, scouting report when they prepare to go play him. And West Virginia has one of the best defenses in the Big 12 overall as a team. And so, of course, they're going to key in on him. And that was the difference in the game.
Well, 1/3 of the turnovers belong to Keyshawn Hall.
Right.
And we had 17 turnovers, right? Which is too many. Earlier on in the season, we had maybe 8, right? And when we were successful, and lately when we've won games, it's been around 11. We had 17 turnovers. 6 of them belonged to Keyshawn Hall, and he only contributed 6 points. DJ also had 6 turnovers, but he dropped in 27 points.
And DJ also had 7 steals. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's a huge
in one game
number. That's a huge number, So, I mean, he's contributing on both ends of the floor. And so, 6 turnovers, but he had 7 steals. So he got back 1 more himself, it's just, I don't know. It's just, and we can't say enough about Darius Johnson. His last regular season week of basketball, I mean, on senior night, we didn't talk about the Oklahoma State game, but we won against Oklahoma State at home on senior night. And if I'm not mistaken, I haven't looked, I don't have it up in front of me, but I'm pretty sure he dropped 36, a career high. 36 points, a career high for DJ in that game. I mean, it's just, I talked about it the week prior of how just, special it was to have a player like that. And we may not see a player like that again, that stays here all 4 years as a contributor, all 4 years. Certainly had his ups and downs, dealt with some injuries and all that, but a guy that was a UCF guy through and through. And for him to come through on senior night and drop 36, he couldn't miss. He just couldn't miss.
You're right. Especially from 3.
Yeah. I mean, he was 7 for 12 from the 3-point line. I mean, he was just from about 10 minutes into that game, he made a 3, a little bit of a dribble move behind the back and just kind of stepped back, made a 3, and ball just splashed down. You could tell it was going to be one of those nights for him where the hoop just looked like an ocean. And he just went off in that game. And you can't, as a UCF fan, but really as a college basketball fan, you just got to be so excited to see that, because he's meant a lot to this program. And I was so happy for him that he was able to go out in his last game in Addition Financial Arena and put up that performance.
Didn't you drop 4 points in your last game as a Knight?
Yeah, that was it was his 36th point was almost as big of crowd crowd reaction as my 2 points that I finally scored on the last game at the UCF arena back in the day. But no, that was an interesting game too. But yeah, what a moment for a DJ. Super happy for him, and he carried that into the game at West Virginia, and quite frankly, who knows what he can come through with this week as his kind of last hurrah in March in a UCF uniform, and hopefully it's just a preview. This past week was a preview of thing to come, because DJ is playing at a very high level right now.
Yep. So as we talk about that, we're entering into the Big 12 conference championship. We talked all season about the potential for us to make the tournament as at large. That door is pretty much closed at this point. So we either have to win the tournament, which is going to be very difficult. I won't say impossible, because there's a minuscule chance.
Sure.
But I wouldn't bet on it. But we are playing Utah tomorrow night. That starts March 11th. So you guys may, by the time this gets posted again, and you're listening to this may have already happened. But we are starting with Utah, which, believe it or not, that was a tougher game than we thought. They have a lot of bigs. We don't have a lot of depth in our front court. Even Rokas was in a boot. And, they have that 3-point shooter that was really bad the first half versus us, was really quiet and really turned it on the second half. So we're going to need to be able to guard the 3-point line. The other thing for me, for the keys to any of these games, is Keyshawn Hall being patient enough to pass out of the defense, not dribble into a defense and try to make things happen, to space the floor a little bit more than what happened before. And then obviously defense. After that, we have Kansas and Arizona. And so it was funny because we were talking in our text talk or our text thread about, who we wanted to line up with on the path through the Big 12 championship. And believe it or not, my preferred path was Utah, Kansas, and Arizona, because I think we do have a shot at all three of those. The biggest one that scares me, Utah is going to be a tougher game than I think people expect because we won the last one. But the one that really scares me is Kansas. And the reason for that is the front court. They have a really, really strong front court. They've got a bunch of guys that have been there, done that. And, the first game, obviously they embarrassed us, but the second game we played a lot better, and it's a winnable game, but without the front court depth, if they get attack Mustafa Chiem, it's going to be really, really difficult for him to stay out of foul trouble. And then we've got Benny Williams after that, what I mean? So I almost think that Coach Dawkins has it set up for a small ball type setup if Mustafa ends up in foul trouble. And I think he would kind of have to do that to combat the front court that either Kansas or Utah has if we run into foul trouble with Mustafa. So,
and you got to think that's the game plan for these teams, right? Like, I mean, because if it's obvious enough for us to see it, like, I mean, there's just no way. Why wouldn't you just go straight at Mustafa from the tip, from tip off? Like, because you get him out of the game, you win the game. You almost like guarantee that you win the game because, especially in Kansas's case, I mean, with the bigs that they have and Dickinson and others, like if you can take him out, like you've got nobody that can guard them in the middle. Like Benny Williams can try his best, but he's just not at that size where he can be able to be a difference maker down low. And
he's a stretch four.
Yeah, he's a stretch four. He doesn't want to, like, he can sky up and block a shot now and then in transition, especially, but he's not the type to guard a post player at the level of Hunter Dickinson, who's just got that, it's got a huge advantage on him in both height and weight, and he's going to back him down and he's going to score on him. I mean, it was evident, and I've talked about it numerous times since, but it was evident in the first game at home against Kansas when, the game was I think it was a 2-point game or a 3-point game, and Mustafa Chiem goes down with his third foul or second foul in the first half, and Hunter Dickinson went on a 12-0 run on his own. And that was the biggest difference in the first game. Obviously, a 51-point, drubbing was, there was a lot of difference makers in that game, but the biggest difference was that front court, just power that they had, we couldn't do anything about that. I would say that I agree with you. Kansas is one that you certainly want to get there. You can't let Madsen on Utah get hot. I think we have enough firepower, even with some height differences, and they're big men. While there's two of them, and they can contribute, they're not obviously as scary as the Kansas front court. I think we can overcome that with a little bit better team defense overall. But you've got to be able to find Madsen the entire game. Like, you can't.
Well, I mean, they were dribble handoff or screening him for threes.
They were running him off of screens. They were creating it. Yeah, if I can remember correctly from that game, which I believe I can, like, they were running him off of screens and they'd have a dribble handoff on the other end, and they were just getting him open in rhythm, and he was knocking him down in the second half. It was actually, if you watch that game back, if I can recall it correctly, I mean, we were kind of lucky that he was off in the first half, because who knows what the deficit would have been. But obviously we were enough to have a 1-point lead and a half in that game. And then we just controlled the game enough in the second half. And if I'm not mistaken, that was one Mustafa's best games of the season too. He had 18 points, 9 rebounds. He had a couple blocks. So he had a great season. Man, I know that I'm like gushing over him like every week, but it's just rare for a player like of his size and his just ability to get better over the course of the season. Like he never seemed to hit a freshman wall this year. Like that kid is something special.
Well, and it's athleticism, right?
Yeah.
For that size, you typically don't get that. I mean, we've had good luck with big men. I mean, we've had good coaching for big men too.
Agreed.
The thing that scares me a little bit if we do decide to go small ball is that we don't have as many options there.
No, I mean, we're thin now. I mean, we're thin.
Juice is out, Sellers is out, you know. So when we're talking about that, it's a little scary because even if we went small ball, if one person has an off night, I mean, Niels Mahosky, right? He played 18 minutes in this last game. The previous game, he had almost a double-double, but then he goes 1 for 4 and scores 2 points, right?
Right.
Tyler Hendricks has been stepping up admirably as well and has been like an energy guy. And JJ Taylor has been playing well in spurts, right?
Yeah.
But Dior has done nothing, right? Yeah. So when you go small ball, it's going to be really, really interesting because if one or two of those guys have an off night, it's going to be a really, really long night for the offense at UCF. And defensively, we just haven't been good.
Yeah.
We haven't been good enough. Let's put it that way.
Right. We're gonna have some form of out of necessity. We're gonna have some form of a 7-8 man rotation, but that 7-8 man rotation is just, it's not going to include. I mean, I haven't heard and I haven't asked around enough to know this, but is Mikey Williams out for this tournament? Like, what's going on with him? Like, the
only thing that we've been told is that he can come back. Not necessarily for this tournament, but a tournament, whether it's this tournament or
So he's out for the Big 12 tournament more than likely.
He's going to be out. That's what I'm saying. Like there's not a lot of firepower and depth behind there. So even if you go small ball, it's going to be tough to do that too because of the depth. We've got 3 starting quality players that are out offensively. So
I mean, when you look at our lineup for the West Virginia game, it's kind of crazy that we even came back and made it the game that it was, because when you look at the lineup that was in that game, you got Darius Johnson, Keyshawn Hall, and Mustafa Chiam as like the main players that got a lot of minutes. And now, yes, Debo Coleman as well. Like he gets a lot of minutes as well.
But let's be real, Debo's there to do Yeah, he's not going to help offensively. He's just he's the heart, he's the hustle, follow the rebound.
Yeah.
Help with the offensive rebound.
Yeah, he's kind of the energy guy and he's a little bit of a glue guy, but yeah, I mean, as far as the people that you're going to rely on to put the ball in the hole, I mean, you got 3 guys on this team, and that's
and one of them who may be in foul trouble midway through the game, and one of them that may be in foul trouble midway through the game. So
you're right. Like,
really tough.
Of the 3 difference makers, you got like, if you lose Chiam especially, you're just like done. But even if you lose Darius, it's like, who's bringing the ball up the court and like managing the team the way he can on the court? Like, we need all 3 of those guys to play like 35, 36, 40 minutes in these games. And if you're talking about trying to win 5 games in 5 days, I don't think that's sustainable. But, you got to take it one game at a time, one half at a time, one play at a time. And Utah is up first. And I think while with some of our injuries, I don't think we match up as well as we could have. And we don't match up as well as we did the first time we played them. But that being said, I know that we have enough talent to overcome them for one game. It's just a matter of what is that game going to take out of us, where we got to just line it up against Kansas. So what's at the very next day, and just something in general that I don't want to say it surprises me every year, but obviously the 2 years we've been in the Big 12, it kind of hits you at this time of year, is that like how important the Big 12 like regular season is for this tournament. Like the fact that Arizona has to play 2 less games than the rest of the teams, or all but 4, all but 3 other teams, I should say. That they win one game and they're in the semifinals, right? Like they win 2, like they're in the finals, and it's just, I think that's I think it's actually a pretty cool structure, the way that the Big 12 tournament is set up, because it does truly reward those teams that get it, that go through the gauntlet of the Big 12 season and have more wins than they do losses. Like it does truly reward that. And then, the irony of all that is that teams that are in the top 4, teams that get the double bye, they don't need that double bye because half of them are going to be number 1 or number 2 seeds anyways in the NCAA tournament. But by the same token, I think that is with these kind of conferences getting bigger and bigger and bigger, having that structure of these conference tournaments, like I believe SEC and Big Ten do it in a very similar fashion. I just think it's interesting to me because it really does set up and reward those who have a good regular season because they deserve it.
Yeah. So, the big thing there to me is, I think for a game like Kansas, where, they're coming in cold and we coming in playing the previous night, I think it's actually an advantage for us. But then once you get to like the Arizona, you've got 2 games under your belt in 2 days, you're wore out. You're like, it's gonna be tough. Let's go ahead.
Even for the Kansas game, it's kind of how did that Utah game go, right? Like that's kind of the thing. Like I agree with you. I like the fact that we're going to have a game under our belt and kind of get into the groove of the tournament. If we were to beat Utah and go on to Kansas, and they're still kind of limping into the conference tournament. Kansas had a disappointing year by their standards, for sure. And so I like the fact that we'll have a game under our belt if we can get past Utah, but you're right. It kind of depends on how that Utah game goes, where like hopefully we don't get too beat up in order to win that game, so we can at least
no double overtimes for that.
Yeah, I don't want any of that. That's for sure.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the question of the hour that is coming. Right, we're not quite there yet. We're not going to get any clarity on this yet. I don't think Terry wants to get ahead of this yet either, but Dawkins Future. So we've talked about what we think in the fact that, it's time to move on from Coach Dawkins, as much as we love him, respect him, all the things, superlatives, right? And that's going to be coming to a head soon. Any AD worth of salt is going to have 2 or 3 options on his short list for every coaching position that he has on staff. Now that the regular season's over, there was a ton of noise about, Coach Dawkins and his seat being hot, etc. However, today there were some rumblings out there that the expectation may be that Terry keeps Dawkins for another year. He has 1 year left on his contract and about $1 million that we owe him if we part ways now. So, there's a host of questions that go along with that. Let's start with number 1. Would you, in this situation, keep Johnny Dawkins for 1 more year to avoid paying out that $1 million and getting us to that next level when we start getting full shares? Or does, for you, it's just time to cut bait and run?
I guess I'll preface my answer to that by saying that I hope it doesn't come to like a situation where you have to like Johnny's gonna get fired. Let's put it that way. Like somebody is forced hand where you're basically saying like you're firing him. Now, that being said, I think the kind of short answer to your question is, and I've obviously come around on this. If you've watched the show or watched Nightline prior to this, or listened to Nightline prior to this, that I think it's coming to a time where this is just not sustainable for Johnny or for UCF. I think it's, for me anyways, it's kind of getting exhausting, just kind of the ups and downs of this of each season, where we kind of raise our expectations and then we kind of have that February lull, that kind of late January to February kind of slump that we've seen numerous times throughout Johnny's career here. And so I think it's just becoming that time where I don't know necessarily that like Coach Dawkins is necessarily like ready to keep this going anymore. And that's with zero discussions with anybody inside the program. That's not any insider knowledge. That's just my intuition and just watching, these games on TV and just, trying to understand what's going on. And if it were to come to a point where this offseason we don't part ways and he's coming back next season, and I said this on the Text Talk, and I have no problem with sharing my thoughts on it here, is that if we do bring him back next season, for whatever those reasons are, and some of those can be behind closed doors. It could be as simple as we want to keep Mustafa Chiam in a UCF uniform, and for some reason Johnny Dawkins is the key to doing that, which, by the way, I wouldn't have an issue with on that. I think there has to be some sort of statement made where you can't, and I've come around on this since last season, you can't have him go into this last season of this contract and just kind of, without any type of announcement or explanation that he's going to, this is a swan song, let's put it that way. He's going to retire after, next season. He wants to finish out his contract with UCF because he loves UCF and he has become such an integrated part of the program, and he wants to ride this out with this team and give it one more go. I think just bringing him back the same way that you kind of brought him back this season, which after his first season in the Big 12, like was I think it was understandable, and we brought him back with a relatively friendly, contract to UCF. I think. That I think you'd have to have, without bringing it back, without some sort of like swan song type announcement, he would be going into next season with a little bit more of a cloud than he's ever had. And I'm not talking about hot seat. It would just be, I don't know, a little bit odd. I feel like it would just feel like it was the end without them talking about it was the end.
Well, I think from a perception perspective, this is going to go over. He's got Terry. If he's going to do that, it's got to control the narrative. It's going to go over like a lead balloon,
which we know he's been really good at controlling the narrative, hasn't he?
Yeah, and that's kind of what we were. This is the tie-in to that poll that I was telling you about, right? So, like, number one, if Terry has valid reasons for whatever reason to hold it over for the next year, I think no matter what, even if he's basically told, look, we're either going to you can either retire or say you're going to part ways or we're going to fire you. I think Dawkins does that one way or the other.
I don't
lets himself be fired. Well, hear me out.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's $1 million buyout there, right? So either he lets himself be fired, right? But he doesn't resign because that $1 million is hanging out there. And if he still wants to continue coaching, then that still needs to be bought out by the next team, right? So there's that gives him some flexibility there. No matter what, it's going to be we've mutually parted ways or retirement. No matter what it happens, when it happens, it's not going to happen anytime soon. I will tell you, if Terry gets the narrative wrong on this, I hope he's engaging a PR firm. Right now, everybody's like it from a perception and a timing perspective. Now's the time to part ways. After this season, everybody's like, okay, let's let Johnny play it out. Everybody walks away mutually happy. That's a win for everybody. Johnny gets to do whatever. He either gets paid the $1 million or the other people pick it up. UCF takes the $1 million, whatever, right? Great. If this goes into another year and there's not a strong messaging as to why, or that it will be his swan song, as you said, then it's going to be a PR disaster for Terry, and he cannot afford another PR disaster right after that. And at that point, I wouldn't be surprised if people don't start calling for his head, to be frank. So perception and timing and messaging is going to be extremely important on this. If you would have told me that there was any thought that Johnny Dawkins would be continuing on after this season last week, I would have told you no. But there are real rumors out there that Terry's planning on keeping him there for another year. And if that happens, if he doesn't message us right, people are going to be calling for his head. And it's going to be a really long off season till football season gets kicked off before, the heat's kind of off. That's a long time for him to have that kind of heat turned up on him, to be frank. So, as far as a rebuild is concerned, that's the other question, right? So if we wait to rebuild, I don't know what pieces are going to be here next year. If we keep this staff together, I think Mustafa stays. He'll stay another year because of who he has coaching him, and not because of Johnny Dawkins.
Yeah.
Right. But the relationships he has with the staff. And, he's going to have to bring somebody in, I think, defensively to help him on that part, because it clearly wasn't resonating with the team this year. So I think from a delaying, I think everybody's, to your point, Ben, tired of the waiting, and it's gotten to such critical mass that everybody's expecting it, that if it doesn't happen, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a real problem. And I don't think it's going to be hey, we're just firing Johnny Dawkins. Like I said, and we've said last week and prior weeks, it's going to be a mutual parting of ways or something
it'll
like
be
that.
some
But it's
sort
going
of
to
respectful thing if it happens that way. But yeah, I don't know. I mean,
he could have done it had we made the NCAA tournament. Like if we would have made the NCAA tournament, at least, even if we bowed out the first round, and he still wanted to make a change and wait a year, I think everybody would have been cool. But now there's no way. I just, unless he makes another magical NIT run or a magical, what is it? The tournament, the new tournament that Fox is putting on, that the Big 12 is a part of, that UCF's expecting to be part of versus the NIT. If he makes some sort of magical run there and wins that, then maybe. And none of this messaging will be finalized until the end, but we're parting ways. It's just a matter of when and how it's messaged.
And I know your answer on this, Roger, and I fully understand your answer, but like, I wonder how much of the administration and the basketball, like the decision makers and things like this put on, I don't want to call it an excuse, but like, when you don't have a player like Jalen Sellers, right? Like, you don't have your leading scorer from last year. He's on the team, but he's not available the whole year. You've had multiple injuries. Obviously, Jordan Ivy-Curry was our third leading scorer for the entire season, and he's out the last 10 games. Mikey Williams is now out. You've got no depth in the front court. Now, granted, that's on the construction of the roster, and I get that. But like, how much of that comes into play when you're a guy like Terry Mohajir to say that, like, you're responsible for constructing the roster. So that's one thing, but like not having the pieces that you thought you were going to have throughout the season and just kind of trying to piece it together the way that you did.
I think
still
if
having a
Terry,
winning record. So I don't know.
I think if Terry knows that he's going to part ways, which I think he has to, I think it doesn't matter.
Well, that doesn't matter if he's already made the decision. I'm
But
actually saying
I'm saying they gave him a prove it contract, and we agreed
Sure.
with that because of the timing of when we started earning full revenue shares, right? He
Yeah.
got his second chance, and we were all okay with that. He got his second chance. It didn't work. It doesn't matter whether it's injuries or whether it's whatever. At the end of the day, we've had 8 or 9 years of this. If this was year 2 or year 3 or year 4, I 100% on board with you, whatever. But the results haven't changed. They just
and
haven't.
actually, I think that when he got that prove it contract, I actually pulled up right before the show, and I have it in front of me here, the net team sheet from 2024. And granted, this is after the conference tournament and all that, but the net team sheet from 2024 and then the 2025 current UCF net team sheet. And what I mean by that is it breaks down quad 1, 2, 3, 4 games. And last season we won 4 quad 1 games. We were 4-10, and we were 2-2 in quad 2 games. But we actually had 3 quad 3 losses and 1 quad 4 loss, which was crazy. I didn't even realize we had that last year. We're undefeated. We're 11-0 in quad 3 and quad 4 games this year. But so many opportunities lost. We're 3-10 in quad 1. We're 2-5 in quad 2 games. So ironically, we've only got 1 less quad 1 wins and the same amount of quad 2 wins, but we have more losses in both of those categories. And then last season, we ended the season at 61 in the net, and we're about to end the regular season at 77 in the net. And so that decline, while it didn't show up necessarily in the quad games, that decline is evident by the net rankings. And that feeds into what you're talking about, where year 1 of the Big 12 and the contract was coming up. We're definitely going to give them a short-term, contract to prove it, if you will. And then year 2, regardless of the injuries, regardless of some of the things that happened, there is a decline there. And like we always say, there's 2 reasons why coaches get fired. They're either absolutely terrible, or they're just good enough every year where they never seem like they're going to be able to get over that hump. And I think with all honesty and with all objectively looking at it, Johnny has been in that second tier for the last 4 years or so. And it's coming to a head right now. And I just would be surprised if he wanted to put himself through that next year.
I can tell you this. If, again, we've been talking all the time when we're talking about the optics and politics for Terry Mohajir, if he doesn't show vision and say, hey, this is an opportunity for him to say, hey, we parted ways with Johnny. It was a mutual thing. We know we needed to move forward and do better as a basketball program. Yes, we still need more resources, but we need to do that. This is his opportunity to kind of show himself from a political perspective that he's got the vision to move forward. If he doesn't do this, and especially if the messaging is terrible, I think that feeds into the narrative, and it's a long off season. And I don't think Terry Mohajir right now, as the head of the Athletics Association, can afford not to let go of Johnny Dawkins. And quite frankly, Night Nation's ready. And yes, there's going to be people, you had it last year where it was he's done more with less and all of that other stuff. But it's not about that. It's about selling. And especially if you have basketball, you want more basketball fans that are UCF fans in there. Give us something that we're building towards, because if it's just more of the same, those numbers are just going to continue.
Yeah, we need energy. We need energy injected into the program. Yeah, we need energy injected into the program. And I would agree with you too. Like if Terry doesn't pull the trigger on this and orchestrate like the right move at this time, and I think the right move is that Johnny Dawkins and UCF mutually part ways. I think that it's almost like Terry Mahajer is just, he's not only kicking the can down the road, what he's really doing is just saying, I'm gonna try to put the focus on Johnny. Like I'll allow him for another year to just be I don't want to call it scapegoat because that means that he's not responsible for this. I'm just saying that like he's allowing Johnny to just be this kind of like to get abused by the fan base for another year. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, he's just kind of pushing that away. And it wouldn't, whereas last season, the short extension he gave him seemed like let's see what you can do, as we get into let prove it to me, as you said.
In the
If
Big
we were to
12,
keep
that
him
you can
around
be
for
a
this
Big
year,
12 coach, that you can be a Big 12 head coach and move the needle.
Yeah, but I'm saying if we were to continue on where he came back next season, it wouldn't seem like that. It wouldn't feel like that. It would just be that he was just here. I don't know, in a lame duck contract too. Like everything about it wouldn't feel right, and I would just be. The more I kind of objectively ponder on it, I just don't. I don't see it happening. Barring some sort of crazy run in the next week, which obviously I hope that happens as a UCF fan, but them winning 5 games in 5 days seems extremely unlikely at this point.
All right. So more to see. And for those of you that are watching, make sure that you hit up the poll and have your voices heard that we'll be posting after the episode drops. And make sure to share it, retweet it, and like it. All right. Let's go ahead and we'll save. I had one more question on here, but I want to save this for when the hot seat talk gets a little bit more hot. Let's talk a little UCF baseball. UCF baseball is now 12-3, swept Monmouth this weekend, and we're disappointed, sort of, kind of, right? So, like, and the reason we're disappointed was for a good reason. It's we run ruled, but basically, although we didn't have run rule on these games, Monmouth, and we've done it 5 straight times. The Bats woke up in a big way, and then we won the game 8-0 on Sunday to complete the sweep. But we were upset we didn't get like plus double-digit runs scored, right? So like it's like spoiled brat problems when it comes to UCF baseball. But the great thing about UCF baseball right now is we knew we had a good pitching staff. That's bearing itself out again. We had a lot of quality depth. I don't think there's anybody there that isn't pushing in the 90s for a fastball. At the end of the day, the bats were the things that we were kind of waiting on to wake up. And boy, have they found their stride. And the crazy thing is, we've showed small ball, we've shown big power hitting. Lex seems to have found his stride again, which was good. He was kind of off last year.
Yeah.
Everybody's batting over 300, and I think the team average is 350 right now, right? And we've also we've shown that we can steal bases, because we weren't successful with that for a while, and then all of a sudden we've stolen a bunch of bases. Tim says, Monmouth, I caught one of those in Halifax River last year. Congratulations, Tim.
Yeah, no, we're a well-rounded baseball team, I think, is to say it in one sentence. Like we have a lot of tools on this team. Like we're right now, obviously we know who we've played, but we've also played Florida and we beat them for the 6th straight time. How you like that?
And Miami tonight, 4-3.
Yeah. Is that tomorrow night? It's tomorrow night. Yeah. Tomorrow night.
No. That's tonight. We beat them tonight, 4-3.
Oh, really? That was a Monday night game? My Lord. I wish I would have realized that. That's
or maybe
fantastic.
I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I thought it was tonight, and we beat them.
I'm pretty sure that game is tomorrow night. Yeah, it's tomorrow night.
Okay.
Tuesday night. Yeah, Tuesday night. So by the time you listen to this, if you're not listening to it live, you will know the result of that game, and hopefully we'll have what would it be, a 7th straight victory? Regardless, Yeah, I mean, after we had a little bit of a slide, our bat, in that second game, and then the second game at USF, our bats just woke up and they've been hot ever since. We are number one in the Big 12 in batting average. It's kind of not close. We're at 350. We're batting 356 as a team. That's crazy as a team to be batting 356. The closest to us is West Virginia at 327. So we're a good 30 points higher than them. And on top of that, so that's our batting. Our pitching is number one in the Big 12 as well. As far as ERA goes, we're 2.45 ERA, and Baylor is number two, and they're 2.84 ERA, and we're fifth in the league in fielding percentage. So overall, team stats are unbelievable. And one of the biggest difference makers, I think, it started about the time that this person was injected into the starting lineup and kind of forced his way to be a regular hitter in this lineup is the number one batting average in the Big 12 right now in Idian Espinal. Espinal has been a huge difference maker at the plate for us, but also in the field. He plays a great second base. He plays multiple positions, but second base is where he has played the most. And a guy like Braden Calise, who is a true utility player, Wally has slid him over to third base, and it's just they haven't really skipped a beat in the field, but he is a real difference maker at the plate. They got him mostly batting in the 2-hole, and he has just rewarded his coaches for giving him a sustainable chance to make a difference in this lineup. And he's batting .553. Like he's just been he's been a superstar as far as his contact skills and his power. He's got 3 doubles. He's got 2 home runs. He's got 12 RBIs. Like he is making a real difference for this team. I mean, our closest batting average on that list, which is still unbelievable at 393, is 14th in the conference with Andrew Williamson, who I think has just been a total stud this year. We've got some great hitters in this lineup that are coming alive as we move forward to the conference season, and they're coming alive at the right time. And like you said, I think in particular, our pitching has been great. In particularly, our bullpen, our relief pitching has been fantastic. I think we found we're finding the right rotation as we move forward towards our conference slate. And this is just a well-rounded baseball team. They can beat you in multiple ways. They've proven that throughout this season. And I don't want to get too excited, based on some of the opponents that we're facing, but still they're proving, there's some capability here in year 2 of Rich Wallace's, run here. And I'm just excited to see it.
Well, I can tell you this, defensively, they're also better. Last year's team was a super regional team. But we had some issues once we started playing around and moving people in spots defensively. So not only all of those things, but defensively we're better too. The crazy thing is, Cruson has always been the guy when he's up that I'm just kind of I'm waiting for him to not do well at the plate or whatever, right? To strike out.
He's been the Roger Phipps, the guy that you're oh, here's Cruson again. I'm gonna be upset about it. He's the one guy on every team that you zero in on. He's the guy for baseball. I get that.
So here's the crazy thing. He's batting .361.
Yeah.
361 for the season, and he's the guy, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think a lot of that comes, no shade to him. I think a lot of that comes because he has hit into
he's
the infield quite a bit.
People on base,
yeah, exactly. I think that's what it is. But he's still batting .361.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely insane.
Yeah, there's a lot of
but this team is better. And the other thing that came out of this game, especially on Sunday, although we were disappointed with not a double-digit win, Staggs got back on the mound and seems to have gotten his groove back. We were expecting Stagliano to be the Friday night starter for the season. He got batted around a little bit early on and was kind of pulled out of the rotation for a bit and then pulled back into the bullpen, and he got a start. I know that Rich Wallace believes in Staggs. I know we all believed in Staggs, right? But it was good to see him get back out there and no runs. That's Tim says, not bad. That's UCF's basketball field goal percentage. That's awesome. But at the end of the day, it was good to see him get back in there, get back on the mound, have a good 6 innings with 0 runs. And yes, it was against Monmouth, but at the end of the day, you need those kinds of things to see the rotation. And Rich has been playing with the rotation and bringing guys out of the bullpen and starting to bring them back into the rotation early to see how they'll fare. But I'm extremely impressed with everybody that we have right now in the pitching staff. And I think Rich has figured out who he wants where. And it's good for when you get into regional situations, you need those arms, right, for those third games, as you kind of move through a regional. That was one thing that we were kind of missing, is we didn't quite have the depth we needed when we went to the regional last year. And I think this year, although the way FSU is playing right now, unfortunately, I think we may end up as good as we are. We may end up at FSU again. But this team has the hitting, has the pitching, has the depth, has the small ball, has the ability to bunt, can steal bases, and has great defense. I mean, there's a lot to like about this team, and we'll see. The Big 12 is not a easy conference to play in, so we'll see how we stack up the Big 12. That actually kicks off with BYU on Thursday at 4 p.m., in case you're watching. And remember, they don't play on Sundays, so that's why it kind of got moved forward today. The one thing I don't like about that Utah game, because it is in Provo, Utah, is it's extremely cold up there right now by Florida standards, right? It's the 20s and 30s, and with precipitation expected for Thursday and then turning into snow. So that is one problem.
In May, you want that game like late in the season because if it's it's one of the most gorgeous ballparks in the country as far as just the backdrop of the mountains and all that stuff. It's actually a beautiful ballpark. I haven't been there. I've seen plenty of pictures of it. But you definitely would want to go to BYU, but you just don't want to go in early March.
Yeah, it's and that's one concern that I have, is that we're going to be playing in the cold, because that's never good for anybody, right? So, I'm excited to we got to get past Miami, obviously, tomorrow night, which I thought the game was already over, but it's not. I guess I'm imagining.
I hope we win 43, like you said, though.
Yeah. So the last time we played, we definitely did. But I expect us. Miami has come off. They started hot, but then they've had several losses, including a series loss to UConn. They lost those 2 games over the weekend, and then won the third one. So I expect us to be able to not only compete but win that game. But going into BYU to start off league play, I'm a little concerned that we're going into the cold. And I can tell you, I was just in Park City / Salt Lake City. What was it, 3-4 weeks ago? It was even colder there. The one thing I will say is Florida cold because of the humidity versus Salt Lake City cold. It's the same way with the heat in Las Vegas. You hear people talk about that. There is a difference. I was outside of the airport with just a pea coat on, no gloves, waiting on my ride for about 20 minutes, no scarf, nothing. And I was fine.
Yeah.
It felt fine. It was 12 to 15 degrees. So there is a difference, but I still don't like the cold.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that front. And just as far as what you were saying about some of the ways that Coach Wallace and the staff have been changing, or I don't want to say messing with it, but fine-tuning the lineup, fine-tuning the pitching rotation. It's just I think that it's so far, Coach Wallace has really shown his ability to make little tweaks and listen to his coaches, listen to his players. He just seems to be, I don't know, like these last few games, obviously when we're winning by the way that we're winning and, beating a team like Florida in midweek. But even that's a great example. I mean, he decided to start Smith in that game,
Who's played really well.
Who has come in relief, and he throws gas. He throws 96, 97 miles an hour. And he came in relief in the beginning of the season. He has been doing well with that. And he said, you know what, he has started in the past, and he said, you know what, I'm going to give you the ball for this game against the number 6 in the country, the second largest crowd in UCF history as far as John Iliano Park. And he came through for us. Not only he did, but I mean, the performance from the relief of Castellano and Galvan, coming in relief in that game. It was just a total team win. But I think it has proven that Wally is just really in tune with what what each player can bring to the table and what this team can do. And it's a great sign of things to come as we move forward to the Big 12 slate.
I think the biggest thing it shows is that, when we had Coach Wally on early this season, before the season kicked off, one of his biggest lessons was they had so many injuries last year that they needed to move people around, that he needed more depth. And I think he's what has been proven to me is that he got the right depth that's going to give us options. Even if you throw a couple of those guys like Galvan in there for 1 or 2 innings, they've got the gas to be able to put guys away. And in close games, especially, that's going to really matter, combined with the defense. That's going to turn into wins for us long term. So
Gavin's a big dude. He's like 6'6", like 250.
I know. Well, I mean, it's all relative. He's a big dude to me. He's a small dude to you at like 7'1".
Yes, but I even see, because he pitched in a game that I went and watched him earlier this season, and I'm just like, man, he looks like he's an intimidating guy on the mound. So I hope he keeps up his high level of play.
All right, let's go ahead and transition to a little bit of listener love this week. I want to give some shout outs to some folks. So let me start with Clay Jerry 71. We posted that poll. He retweeted it, followed us, and liked it. And he tagged Terry Mahajer and says, literally tagged his official account and says, "What are you doing to the athletic program that I love?" So thank you, Clay Jerry 71. I'm assuming it's Jerry Clay, but you never know. For participating, retweeting, following, doing all of those things. And, granted, we don't have thousands of people voting in that poll, but there was enough in there to show you how big of a problem that is. So hopefully Terry's paying attention to that. Also want to shout out at Nick Williams, at Alexander, both new follows for us. And then Ryan Roy 8409 with his comment, great show and info and combo. So thank you so much for the continued support. We encourage all of you to participate as Tim does, and some of our other folks that participate on a regular basis. You guys are part of the show and you can help direct traffic. All right, let's go ahead and I got to come up with a new word, because we can't use the P word, and I can't use transition. There's just too many jokes there. Yeah. So I've got to come up with another word. Let's go ahead and change directions to
change direction.
Yeah, that doesn't quite work. Unfortunately, we don't have Alan and Josh. Like I said, Alan is in Jamaica, making his wife crazy right now, and Josh is out sick. We wish him well and hope he, gets well soon. He's got a fever that he's running and couldn't make it tonight. But let's go ahead and get a quick update on other UCF sports that Alan does not watch. One of the cool things about the sports that Alan does not watch is that our sports are ranked. So Alan, do us a favor like Josh does sometimes at basketball games and football games, and just don't watch them, because our number 23 women's tennis team, they were number 20, but are now number 23. beat number 15 Baylor 5-2. Then they beat number 40 TCU 4-1. And next up, we've got Iowa State and Kansas, which are ranked below TCU, but are still ranked. They are now 12-1 on the season. If you're not paying attention to women's tennis, you should be. They're ranked number 23. Great performances by the ladies. And, oh, by the way, remember how we had great tennis and then it kind of fell off? We had new stewardship and new leadership. We've also got a number 13 men's tennis team. They were ranked number 11. We'll tell you why in a few minutes, but they are still number 13. They beat UNCW. Do you even know what school that is? UNCW? I'm
Wilmington,
North Carolina West.
Wilmington.
Wilmington. Okay,
yeah.
UNC Wilmington and Coastal Carolina 4-1. Unfortunately, they did lose to the number 36 Cows, 1-6. So I don't know what happened there, but still, this team has got some challenges in front of them. Next, number 2 TCU and number 8 Arizona. They are currently 14-4 on the season and still number 13 in the country. So 2 ranked tennis teams. I think baseball will be ranked as the RPI catches up, because right now, if you look at the number 1 and 2 teams, they have not have stellar records, and it's based on the teams that they have played against and the fact that they were losses on the road, which counts for less. So that RPI won't correct itself until probably about midway through the season. So don't pay too much attention to that. But right now they are playing like the ranked baseball team. However, we do have another ranked team, number 25, UCF softball, 19-8-1. They beat number 4 Arizona on the road, 9-3 and 5-4 after losing the final game 1-10 in the 5th. So they didn't get the sweep, but the pitching again was stellar. And the hitting woke up. This is the number 4 team in the entire country. Arizona always has a good softball team. They're perennially in the tournament and regionals and super regionals, championship contenders. And they beat them 9-3 and then 5-4. That 9-3 win, they had to have some good defense before we propelled to get that 9-3 win. 5-4, another close game. We were behind for a bit, and we were able to play good defense. Had great pitching on, and were able to string it out to win 5-4. So again, another team that's worth watching. Like I said, they're 19-8-1. Next up, though, they have the number 3 Florida Gators in Gainesville tomorrow night. If you're watching this live, March 11th at 6 p.m. So baseball and softball will be playing some pretty exciting games. So I don't know which one we're going to watch first or last or whatever, but definitely tune in to the round ball
dual
sport.
Screens tomorrow night.
Exactly. Dual screens. Get your YouTube TV fired up. All right. Women's track and field will also begin competing in the NCAA championships. This is the indoor championships, March 14th and 15th, which is this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And their outdoor season starts on the 21st. So we transition from indoor to outdoor coming up as well. So lots to cheer for. Great baseball team. The other sports are doing well. Big questions as it pertains to our basketball team. Football's kind of working its way through its issues. So lots to talk about here in the off season for UCF sports. But that's all I have. Ben, do you have anything else you want to share with the team, with the folks?
Well, let's hope our basketball team can really shine through. We didn't mention that Darius Johnson got honorable mention All Big 12 conference, as well as Keyshawn Hall got second team All Conference, and Mustafa Chiem and Darius Johnson, the Big 12 blocks per game and steals per game leaders, respectively, did not they are not a part of the all defensive team in the Big 12. So they got the biggest robberies of the deal, but I'm glad Darius.
Well, I think Keyshawn Hall did. I think Keyshawn Hall did too, because he's the leading scorer for the Big 12 and didn't make the first team.
And number 10 in rebounds per game too. Like that's an underrated part of his game. So stats wise, like number 10 in the conference in rebounds per game and the leading scorer. And he didn't make a 10-player first team all conference. So there's a lot of snubs to go around when it comes to UCF, but that's what happens. They concentrate on the teams that had a little bit more success record-wise, team-wise, and even when you are the leading steals per game guy like Darius Johnson or the leading blocks per game guy like Mustafa Chiam, I mean, when your overall team defense isn't up to par, they're not looked at as a defensive team, and therefore you get penalized a little bit when it's a 50-50 call between one player and the other. So, but I'm glad for Darius and Keyshawn that they did make it onto those teams, and UCF got mentioned in that light this week. And then hopefully coming up this week, we can surprise some people at the Big 12 tournament.
Just beat Utah and make it at least a close game at Kansas.
Yeah, make it a game.
And we'll see what happens in the postseason. All right, folks. Thank you so much for following along. Thank you for participating in the show. Thank you for viewing. Thank you for sharing. Make sure you tell your friends. Make sure you retweet, make sure you share the show with your friends. We appreciate all of you. Go Knights and
charge on.
Charge on, baby. I guess this is where I have to put the fillers in Josh's, not like